Hello guys, and welcome to the Trapping Today channel. Tonight we're going to talk about the upcoming fur harvesters auction and fur prices and what might be happening, what the developments have been recently. But before we get into it, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and check out the brand new Trapping Today magazine. I'm going to put a link down below this video in the description for you to see, or go to trappingtoday.com/magazine. Or do a simple Google search, you will find it. But I'm excited about that. That's just come out. It's free to read, at least for now, and I think you'll be interested. There's a bunch of cool articles and stuff you can look at. 70 some odd pages of trapping. So, all right, we're going to talk fur prices, and the big thing that I want to talk about tonight is really quantities. So I'm going to pull up the announcement for the fur harvesters auction that's coming up. It's going to be in just a few weeks here. It is scheduled for March 20th through the 22nd of 2023. Now, the important thing to understand is that this auction, this is the first major auction of the season, and Fur Harvesters is the only auction house remaining in North America. And so this is really going to be our big read on what's going to go on in the fur market. Now, used to be you'd have auctions back when the fur market was good and fur was moving and selling readily. You'd have auctions. You'd have one usually in December. You'd have one in late January, early February. You'd have one in March, and then another one in May or June. And there were at least 3 or 4 auctions every year. Then we went down to 2 auctions. And this was 2 major auction houses, North American and Fur Harvesters. And now North American Fur Auctions went out of business, went bankrupt, and we're down to 1 auction house. And that 1 auction house, we're only getting 2 major auctions in a year, and they're all late. They're March and June or July. So that's what we're dealing with. So we haven't really gotten a good idea of what's going on with fur prices because we haven't had the chance to see true price discovery with multiple buyers bidding on fur. So what we know right now is the fur market continues to be in a very, very low, depressed state. I don't think that is going to change. I don't know if it's ever going to change. My opinion has kind of wavered on this a little bit. I thought it was coming back, but I'm really starting to see the writing on the wall. There's a lot of potential reasons that fur may not be with us as far as a major item as part of our economy as trappers in the future. So I won't get into that now. I have a number of different videos where I describe the overall market, my thoughts on it, but that's the long-term view. Short-term, let's look at what's going on. I want to look at some of the, I guess you might say, trends. What we're seeing in some local auctions and some regional type auctions and regional buying, and then I want to look at quantities. Because quantities, I think, are going to play an important part in this upcoming auction. Quantities being the number of fur pelts that are offered for sale. But first off, we all know the coyote market is dead. Coyotes are selling for very, very low. Even the top Western coyotes, the latest auctions have been, even the very best of the best might get $30 to $40. But most of them, you were talking $15, $20. The Southern coyotes, maybe $10. And other places, just hard to sell at all. Raccoon, I've seen several auctions in the eastern United States where raccoons sold for less than $5 averages. Some of the better Midwestern raccoons are going for maybe $10 to $15 for the best. A lot of averages are going to be around the $5 to $8 range. Otter, $15, maybe $20. Some places, some of the local auctions, otter can do pretty well when the quantities are limited. Red fox are terrible right now. I haven't seen a single auction where red fox have done well. Can't sell them. Muskrats are I was at the beginning of the season, I predicted $2 to $3. They've been around $2 to $2.50 maybe. So muskrats are being they're a little tough to move right now. Bobcat are a little bit tough to move. We're seeing some some slightly lower than what I had in my fur market forecast. Pretty close, but slightly lower. Skunk are moving pretty good. Wild mink are about what we would expect. But the one item that has been a bit of a pleasant surprise has been beaver. So beaver are not necessarily like shooting up to the sky or anything, but they're moving, and there seems to be enough demand for the limited supply that's out there that beaver are selling, and the average prices that trappers are getting are creeping up. So that's going to be very interesting. Castor, not so much. Castor is kind of weakened. It's not doing great, but the demand for beaver and the prices for beaver have been surprising in my opinion. So let's look at quantities. So what I did is I went through some of the history in Fur Harvester's auction. Unfortunately, when NAFA went out of business, we lost a lot of the data that NAFA used to provide for the average fur prices and quantities and stuff. But Fur Harvesters has it back to 2003 approximately. So there's a lot of good information there. And one of the interesting things is I plotted the quantities of beaver that were sold every year at Fur Harvesters. And the reason for that is the beaver offering for March 21st is 30,000 beavers. Now, you might think, oh, 30,000, that's a lot of animals. But I kind of felt like that wasn't, just based on what I've seen offered in past auctions, that really seemed low to me. So I decided to look into the numbers a little bit. I actually plotted stuff on a Excel spreadsheet and came up with some pretty interesting patterns here. I don't think you guys are probably not going to be able to see my screen very well. But I'm just gonna, I'll rattle off the numbers for you. Basically, we have in Fur Harvesters, when you combine all the auctions from basically 2000 and I just went back to 2014 to make it simpler. From 2014 until say about 2019, we're typically looking at somewhere between 70,000 and 120,000 beaver offered in a typical year. And for this auction, for 30,000 beaver being offered, there's a pretty good chance there's going to be 30 or 40,000 more offered in the next auction for the spring. So let's pretend, we're probably going to be around 60 or 70,000 beaver quantity offered for the season, for the 2023 season. Okay, you might think, well, that's 60,000. That's on the low end. 60, 70,000 is the very low end for the 2014 to 2019 period for Fur Harvesters. So that's pretty much makes sense. We're sending about the same amount of beavers, but there's one thing that you're not factoring in, and that is those years Fur Harvesters was selling beavers, and NAFA was selling, North American Fur Auctions was selling just as many or more beavers than Fur Harvesters. And so you were looking at the combined, you were looking at half of the totals back then. Now we're looking at the combined totals for all auction beaver for all of North America. Of course, Grunwald Fur and Wool is stepped up their buying. They're buying more beaver. So that's picking up some of that market. But still, if we look at 2020 and 2021, we notice that 2020 Fur Harvesters offered 147,000 beaver between their two auctions. 2021, between their two auctions, they offered 156,000 beaver. So after NAFA went under and you took all of the beaver coming in from North America to the auction market, 150 grand, about 150,000 beaver. The market has been of course very low. That number dropped to 92,000 in 2022, but that's still considerably, that's 50% more than what our predicted full season offering for 2023 is going to be. And for the 2020-2021 periods, right now we're looking at half of the beaver offering that we saw during those 2 years. So what does that mean? I've always believed, and I've come to believe this more and more as I've looked into the fur market and followed it over the years, that the fur market is primarily driven by demand. What that means is you have supply and demand kind of that are both important factors that influence prices, but changes in demand have a much greater influence on price than changes in supply. And that's because fur it's a commodity, but it's a finicky one because of the fashion aspect of it. And when something catches on, demand just can shoot right up and overwhelm the supply. And the supply can be very limited and takes time to catch up to the demand. And so the demand can just completely outweigh any supply and shoot prices way up. And it can happen the same way on the other side. When supply gets really low, if demand is high and supply gets really low, and all of a sudden you just run out of fur, well, you're not going to have certain fashion items. They operate on economies of scale, so they need certain quantities of a type of pelt in order to make a line and make something that's fashionable, that's going to catch on and be popular in the market and sell. Well, if supply gets too low, they're not going to keep pushing prices up because they don't have what they need to meet the product. So what they're going to do is just completely shift into something totally different and offer some other type of fur or something outside of fur. And so demand is not quite, or supply, sorry, is not quite as important as demand. Demand is critical. But with a given demand, if you cut supply in half, there is potential to have these situations where we see a big swing in prices. And so all that I'm saying is I don't know that this is going to happen, but the numbers are lining up to potentially see a huge increase in the average price of beaver at this upcoming sale in March. So it should be quite interesting for people who have beavers in the sale. I don't know that it's going to happen, but it could surprise us. So that was the good news. Just looking at the other quantities, I looked at last year what was offered from fur harvesters just to see if our quantities have changed any. It's really interesting that even though the market has been down for some years, we're still getting a lot of fur put into these auctions, a lot of fur sent to the market. It just shows that a lot of trappers, regardless of price, are still out there trapping, whether it's for controlling animal populations and they want to salvage the fur, not waste it, or they just love to trap and they want to be able to send the fur, and anything you get from the fur check is a bonus. Or if they're in like Canada and they have some quotas, they have to catch a minimum number of animals to maintain their trap lines. That could be part of it too. But for raccoons, basically we have the same amount of raccoons offered at this auction as we did last year. Mink, pretty much the same number. Skunk, pretty much the same. Otter, the otter offering is a little bit lower than normal, but it's pretty close. Red fox is about the same. This was interesting. Muskrat. There are going to be 250,000 muskrats offered at this sale. And in the last two auctions, we've had 117,000 and 209,000 muskrats. So I think what's happening, let me check real quick at the last auction, June 2022 for muskrat. Of course, when I'm looking for it. Yeah, so they basically didn't sell last year. And so what we have with muskrat is the two auctions in 2022, because those muskrats didn't sell, most of them didn't sell, they held over to this sale, and then you have all the muskrats that are being sent from this season's harvest to add to that. I think muskrat could be a complete flop. We could have a major crash in muskrat prices based on these quantities, and that's not something I would have predicted before. Part of it depends on if Fur Harvesters wants to kind of keep holding the line and hope that something changes, but at some point you do have to let go of those pelts, and you just they don't last forever, and you keep holding over stale goods from previous years, and they get even harder to sell, and then it makes it harder to sell the fresh goods. So muskrat could be a surprise for us as well. Coyotes are pretty much on pace with where they were last year for quantities. Because the demand is so low, I expect the prices to be very poor for coyotes. Interestingly, Canada lynx numbers are way down. And when, the lynx cycle has been down, it's starting to come back up, but the last couple of years it's been down. So population numbers are low, so trappers haven't caught as many lynx. And because the offering is so low, potential for an increase in price for lynx is there. So hopefully we can see that. That's a possibility that we might see a bump there. And bobcat is way down. The bobcat quantities offered are way down. I'm guessing that's in large part because the bobcat prices have been pretty poor, especially the western cats. So people aren't targeting as many of them. I don't know that for sure. But the numbers of bobcat offered at this sale are half of what was offered at each sale last year. So we have 4,000 bobcats on offer. Last year was 9,000 and 8,000 in the two sales. So I don't know enough about what's going on in that market to really say much, but there's potential for maybe some increase in bobcat prices just based on quantities. So anyway, that's a little bit on what's going on lately and quantities of fur being offered. The auction is going to be an in-person auction for the first time since before COVID. So that's an encouraging sign that there's going to be people that are going to be able to be in-person bidding on items that they actually get to inspect and see for themselves. And there's also going to be an online component where people who can't make it to Canada or don't want to go that far for just small quantities of fur they need to buy, they can bid online as well. But the preference is going to be given if there's a tie in an auction or whatever, the preference is going to be to the people that are there in the room. And I have not heard yet whether we're going to be able to watch this thing live streamed on YouTube. One time in the past I watched it on YouTube, which was pretty cool. I don't know if they're going to try to do that or not, but if they do, if we do have either a YouTube or an audio stream, I'm going to be providing some coverage to keep you guys up to date on what's going on with the auction results there. So that's a wrap. Hope you guys, hope that was somewhat informative and gives us something to look forward to here in about 4 weeks with this big fur auction coming up. Take care, guys.